For a long time, global governance has had a familiar problem. It moves slower than technology. And honestly, we've tolerated that gap because the consequences usually showed up gradually. But now we're stepping into something different. In the intelligence economy, AI doesn't just support decisions, it shapes them. It nudges markets. It influences what people believe. It can steer public services and even help run critical infrastructure. So the question isn't, should AI be governed? That debate is basically over. The real question is, how do we govern it? Who gets to set the rules? And what are those rules actually designed to protect? Today we're digging into AI Governance 2035, the emerging global regulatory order that's likely to define the next decade of intelligence. Welcome back to the B.I channel, where data meets decisions. I'm your host, Solen Hale, and joining me is strategist and the founder of the B.I channel, Nikiema. We're going to break down how nations are building the rules, frameworks, and institutions that will govern AI in the years ahead. Nikiema, welcome back.
Always good to be here, Solen. And you're right to frame it as a new order. AI Governance 2035 is where intelligence, ethics, economics, and geopolitics collide. It's not just a policy conversation. It's a power conversation.
Let's start with something basic, because people use the term like everyone agrees on what it means. When we say AI governance, what are we actually talking about?
AI governance is the full system that directs how AI is created and used. That includes laws and regulations, of course. But it also includes standards, oversight bodies, auditing requirements, enforcement mechanisms, and ethical principles. And here's the key point. Governance isn't just a list of restrictions. It's the architecture of trust. It's the blueprint that tells society, businesses, and governments. This is how the system will behave, and this is what happens if it harms people.
So it's bigger than compliance. It's the foundation that makes responsible intelligence possible.
Exactly. Governance answers some very practical questions. What is an AI system allowed to do in high-stakes settings? Who controls it and who can access it? How are decisions made and explained? And when things go wrong, who is accountable and what's the remedy?
That last one matters a lot. Because if no one is accountable, then AI becomes this ghost decision maker. It impacts your life, but no one can be held responsible.
Right. And that's why I often say AI governance is essentially the rulebook of the intelligence economy. If intelligence becomes infrastructure, then governance becomes the building code.
Okay, let's build that building code. When we say AI Governance 2035, we're talking about an emerging global regulatory order. What does that order actually look like? What are the recurring building blocks that we're seeing across countries?
I describe it as 5 pillars. Different regions emphasize different parts, but globally, these 5 are becoming the core structure.
Let's walk through them one by one. First pillar, transparency standards. What's changing there?
Transparency is moving from nice to have to required, especially in finance, healthcare, employment, education, and public policy. The expectation becomes, if an AI system denies a loan, recommends a medical pathway, flags a person for investigation, or ranks someone for a job, it needs to provide an explanation that's meaningful to humans. Not every model can open itself like a textbook, but governance pushes for traceability. Documentation, data lineage, model cards, decision logs, and disclosure about limitations.
So transparency isn't just, tell us your secret sauce. It's, prove that the system is understandable enough to be challenged.
Exactly. People need recourse. If AI affects your rights or your opportunities, you should be able to ask, why? And get an answer that isn't a black box shrug.
Second pillar, accountability frameworks. This one gets messy fast. When an AI system causes harm, who's responsible?
That's the heart of it. Governance is increasingly separating roles. The developer who builds the model, the organization that deploys it, the operator who uses it, and sometimes the data provider. Accountability frameworks define shared responsibility across that chain. It's similar to other industries. If a product fails, you investigate design, manufacturing, and usage. With AI, the challenge is that AI can behave differently depending on context, data drift, user behavior, or malicious manipulation.
Which means we didn't mean for it to do that won't be an acceptable answer.
right? Because governance is moving toward outcome-based responsibility. If you deploy high-impact AI, you're accepting a duty of care, monitoring, auditing, incident reporting, and corrective action.
Third pillar, ethical intelligence protocols. This is where people either get inspired or skeptical. What does it mean to embed ethics into AI systems?
It means translating values into requirements. Things like fairness, non-discrimination, privacy, accessibility, and respect for human rights become more than corporate slogans. Governance pushes them into measurable obligations. For example, if an AI system is used in hiring, you can't just claim it's fair. You need evidence, bias testing, demographic impact analysis, and processes to mitigate disparities. If it's used in public services, you need protections to prevent exclusion and to ensure people aren't trapped by automated decisions.
And ethics also shows up in what a system is not allowed to do, right? Like certain uses becoming off limits.
Exactly. In many places, we're seeing constraints on high-risk surveillance, manipulation, and systems that undermine fundamental rights. The specifics vary, but the direction is clear. Ethical boundaries are becoming policy boundaries.
Fourth pillar, safety and risk classification. This feels like the part where AI starts getting treated like other critical technologies.
That's a great way to put it. Think about medical devices, aviation, nuclear energy, pharmaceuticals. We don't regulate a toothbrush the way we regulate a pacemaker. Risk classification is about saying, not all AI is the same. A music recommendation algorithm is different from an algorithm that determines prison sentences or controls a power grid. So AI systems get categorized based on potential harm. The higher the risk, the stricter the requirements. Pre-deployment testing, third-party audits, cybersecurity requirements, continuous monitoring, and in some cases, licensing or certification.
Which also means that move fast and break things becomes less acceptable in high-impact areas.
Exactly. In high-impact AI, breaking things can mean breaking lives, institutions, markets, or democratic processes.
Fifth pillar, cross-border governance treaties. This is the global layer. Why does AI governance inevitably become international?
Because AI systems and data flows don't respect borders. A model can be trained in one region, deployed in another, hosted in a third, and used globally. If each country has incompatible rules, you get fragmentation. Companies struggle to comply, governments struggle to enforce, and the public ends up with uneven protection. So nations negotiate shared principles and interoperable rules. Treaties and agreements start covering things like data transfers, safety benchmarks, incident reporting norms, and coordination around powerful frontier models.
So AI Governance 2035 isn't just national regulation. It's a network of national systems, plus alignment mechanisms between them.
Exactly. And that network becomes the new global regulatory order.
Let's talk power, because everything you just described sounds like governance as protection. But there's another layer, governance as strategy. How does AI governance shape global competition?
There are three major shifts happening. First, governance becomes a competitive advantage. Countries with clear, credible rules attract investment. Businesses want stable environments where they know what's allowed, how to bring products to market, and how to earn public trust. And citizens are more likely to accept AI when they believe it's being audited and controlled.
So good governance can actually accelerate adoption because it reduces fear and uncertainty.
Exactly. The second shift is that ethical leadership turns into geopolitical influence. If your country becomes known as the place that sets the gold standard for responsible AI, other countries start adopting your norms. Your standards become default settings in global markets.
And norms are powerful because they outlast individual products or companies.
Right. And third, regulatory alignment becomes a strategic asset. We'll see alliances form not only around defense or trade, but around shared AI governance frameworks. If two regions align on audits, transparency, and safety classifications, their AI ecosystems integrate more easily.
So governance becomes a kind of soft power, not through force, but through shaping what's considered acceptable.
Exactly. Whoever writes the rules often shapes the market.
Now, this global order isn't uniform. Different regions have distinct approaches. Let's run through a few regional models and what they prioritize.
Sure, and I'll say up front, these are patterns, not stereotypes. Each region has internal variation, but the broad models are useful.
Let's start with APAC. What's the model there?
APAC tends toward pragmatic governance. The focus is often on enabling innovation while staying adaptive. Rather than locking in rigid rules too early, many APAC jurisdictions favor iterative policy, sandboxes, and quick revisions as the technology evolves.
So more of a learn-by-doing approach, with guardrails that adjust over time.
Exactly.
How about Europe?
Europe is the ethical governance model. The strongly rights-based. You see a sharp emphasis on transparency, consent, accountability, and protections tied to human dignity and civil liberties. Europe often pushes the idea that if AI is going to be integrated into society, it must be aligned with fundamental rights from day one.
So Europe is basically saying, innovation is welcome, but not at the expense of rights.
Exactly.
North America.
North America, particularly the US, has leaned toward an innovation-first model. There's a strong drive to keep the ecosystem competitive and fast-moving, with governance often developing through sector-specific rules rather than one unified national framework.
So instead of one big AI law, you get layers. Finance rules here, healthcare rules there, procurement rules somewhere else.
Yes, and sometimes that creates speed and flexibility. But it can also create gaps, especially when AI crosses sectors, which it often does.
LATAM.
LATAM often expresses a social governance model. There's a strong focus on equity, access, and the public sector role in shaping AI outcomes. In many parts of the region, governance is tightly tied to social development goals, reducing inequality, improving public services, protecting vulnerable communities.
So AI governance is framed not just as risk control, but as a social contract.
Exactly.
And Africa?
Africa is where we often see a leapfrog governance model. There's an opportunity to build governance frameworks without being trapped by legacy systems. And because mobile infrastructure has been a major driver of innovation across the continent, governance often emphasizes mobile intelligence, digital identity concerns, and practical guardrails that support fast adoption while protecting people.
That leapfrog idea is interesting because it suggests that governance can be designed for the future rather than retrofitted from the past.
Exactly. And when it's done well, it can be very powerful.
We've covered what strong governance looks like. Now let's talk about the other side. What happens when governance is weak or missing?
Weak AI governance creates predictable risks and they compound. You get algorithmic discrimination, where systems systematically disadvantage certain groups. You see manipulation, where AI-generated content distorts public opinion or floods information channels with convincing falsehoods. You see systemic bias becoming embedded in institutions because the AI is trained on biased data and deployed at scale. You can even get economic instability when automated systems interact in ways no one fully understands or controls.
And the most dangerous part might be the trust collapse.
Exactly. When people stop trusting decision systems, they stop trusting the institutions using them. And that becomes a national vulnerability, because trust is a kind of infrastructure too. When it breaks, everything gets harder. Policy implementation, economic growth, civic stability.
So weak governance isn't a neutral choice. It's a risk decision, whether leaders admit it or not.
Right. And the irony is, the countries that delay governance often end up reacting to crises, which can lead to rushed, heavy-handed regulation that's worse for innovation and worse for public safety. Proactive governance is usually the smarter path.
Let's get practical. If a national leader, or even a policy team, is listening and thinking, okay, we want to be ready for AI governance 2035, what's the roadmap? What do nations actually need to build?
I give 5 concrete moves. First, establish a national AI oversight body with real authority. Not just a committee that writes reports, but an institution that can set standards, coordinate across agencies, and enforce rules where necessary. Second, create transparent auditing systems. That includes technical audits, compliance audits, and impact assessments for high-risk deployments. Auditing needs to be routine, not an emergency response. Third, align with emerging cross-border governance. You don't want your country to become isolated by incompatible standards. Interoperability matters. Shared definitions, shared reporting practices, shared safety baselines. Fourth, invest in ethical intelligence education. That means training regulators, judges, civil servants, engineers, and business leaders to understand AI systems well enough to govern them. And fifth, build public trust through accountability. People need clear channels to challenge decisions, report harm, and get remedies. Otherwise, governance becomes theater.
That's the thread running through everything you're saying. Governance isn't optional. It's foundational infrastructure for the intelligence era.
Exactly. If AI becomes a central capability of economies and states, then governance is what keeps that capability aligned with society, stability, and human outcomes.
Let's close with the big picture. AI governance 2035 will shape the next era of global power. Not only because it reduces harm, but because it defines who sets the standards, who earns the world's trust, and who gets to lead in the intelligence economy. The countries that build strong governance frameworks, transparent oversight, ethical protocols, and enforceable accountability will be the ones that attract investment, build legitimacy, and scale intelligence responsibly. The countries that don't may find themselves shaped by forces they can't control. Kel, thanks for joining us.
Always a pleasure, Solen. This is one of those topics that will define the decade, and I'm glad we're talking about it early and clearly.
And thanks to you for listening to the B.I channel, where data meets decisions. If this episode sparked questions for you about transparency, accountability, or how AI governance will affect your industry, keep that curiosity close. The rules are being written right now, and the future will belong to the people who understand them.